Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the World Football Summit podcast. I'm your host, Jaime, Director of Content and Communications at World Football Summit. Today, I'm going to sit down with Dave Lipp. Actually, I sat down with him during World Football Summit Asia in Riyadh, and it was a fascinating conversation. For those of you who don't know Dave, he used to be a strategy director at Manchester United. And so you can see how excited I was to have him on the show because we spoke about, all the stuff that the Manchester United brand has been able to achieve over the years, in terms of, we talk about Web3, we talk about the power of the brand, we talk about all the business initiatives that, from a club perspective, they were implementing, which I thought was very interesting. I really hope you get value out of it. I really enjoyed the conversation with Dave, and actually, hopefully we'll see him coming back to the industry soon and have more about his experience so you guys can learn. Before we go into the conversation with Dave, just want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by FG Sports, which is a Saudi-based company that helps develop the marketing and media sector. So they joined us for World Football Summit in Saudi. So you want to get an understanding of the Saudi ecosystem, I really suggest you check them out. They have presence in LinkedIn, Twitter, the website. Anyway, FG Sports. Make sure you check them out. And nothing else from my side. Let's welcome Dave Lipp to the show. Well, guys, welcome to another episode of the World Football Summit podcast. Today we're recording live from Riyadh, and I am honored to have Dave Lipp on the show. He's formerly or a former director at Manchester United, one of the biggest brands in football. And it is a pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure to be here. First time in Riyadh and absolutely loving it.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a very fun conversation, at least for me, because I'm going to get to ask questions that I'm really intrigued about. And I guess my first one being, we're at a time when, football is kind of like a crossroads. They want to respect the legacy, the tradition, but they're also trying to innovate, no? And what better club, because all the things that, they have been doing, that Manchester United, and I want to take advantage of your experience there, even, if you're not there already. But when you look at, how the business model has evolved, how do you think, or what are the assumptions that remain the same, that are still true today?
Sure, and yes, thanks for that. It is a question which, of course, we always are questioning ourselves. Fundamentally, we are a club that plays in leagues, right? So whether that be the Premier League or whether that be in a UEFA competition, so we need to adhere to the rules that govern our league if we are to play in it, right? So there are elements of sustainability and financial fair play that come into how we have to operate both revenue and expenses. Revenue, how we generate money coming in; expenses, for the most part, of course, our players and other elements of putting on the competition, putting on the game. So. If you break the traditional revenue streams out, right, broadcast for the most part is determined by the league and the strength of the league, and the competitions of both Premier League and Europe-based competitions that we participate in. The broadcast revenue has continued to grow, continued to diversify into new platforms. And represents a big majority of what the revenue is for the club that we operate within. Subsequently, our partnership team, traditional sponsorship and licensing, is continuing to evolve. It's continuing to, it gets affected by economic situations, right? When there is a recession, we sometimes understand that brands pull back from some sort of different types of advertising. And where I think that helps us, though, is we have a lot of digital channels, right? And brands during challenging times lean into digital channels because they're a little bit more measurable. And there's a little bit of elements that can come into a partnership that actually works in our favor when we do have a bit of an economic downturn. But for the most part, with Man United have 1.1 billion fans and followers around the world. A very high addressable portion of those, whether it be through our own channels or partner channels, whether it be through our pay TV linear channels and partners around the world, that will continue to hold value for a lot of brands that just still value that exposure.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, the partnership business is evolving. There's elements of performance-based that come into them, but for the most part, we are leaning into the fact that we have that massive reach.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's about connecting with fans, which kind of like ties well with a question that I always like to ask this to industry leaders like yourself, which is this debate between the fan and the customer. And what I mean by this is, you look at football and a lot of clubs are thinking, how can I turn my fans into customers? But when you look at every other industry in the world, they're looking at from the other angle, which is how can I turn my customers into fans?
Yeah.
How do we find that sweet spot?
It's a fair question, and I think it's not right to think that every fan should be a monetizable thing. Okay. Right? Of course, there are laws and rules against directly marketing to children, and I think we have a responsibility as a club to help drive all aspects of what the life cycle will be for a fan of United, right? I think we should be doing initiatives that encourage participation, encourage people to not just be behind the screen as a youth, but also to get outside, kick a ball around, and really fill that next generation of fan, right? There will be times where there's a monetization angle, right? And the natural thing is to, okay, it's a kid's birthday, right? So why not send a message to a parent that we have in our CRM? Have you considered purchasing a
It's a good touch point to have.
But I don't necessarily think that we should look at new channels like, say, Discord or Roblox or some of the digital channels that are out there to think that is where we should be monetizing a fan. I think we have, first and foremost, the responsibility to put on a top tier performance that drives the fandom, drives the passion, and really, gets them into the club for all the parts that football are, but for predominantly because it is a football club.
Yeah. And actually that ties a little bit into what the club is doing on the Web3 front, right? It's pretty much enabling, and it's one of the best use cases of the technology that I've seen in the industry, because it's helping fans understand the space, right?
Absolutely. We felt it was important to educate fans about Web3 and blockchain-based technology as we rolled out a product, right? And the product was, for the most part, designed to just get that into people's hands, right? So it predominantly was free initially, and then we moved into different types of utility where there was a paid-for component to it. But blockchain-based technology is still so early in its infancy. Yes, we launched a product called digital collectibles. People in the past referred to those as NFTs. But it's really designed, though, not necessarily to make money from, but to really give our fans something that that they're desiring. I think there's a lot of work that's still to be done on how that translates into other ecosystems beyond the one that we have. I think a lot of work to be done on standards and cross-world kind of utility of digital collectibles. But it gets people thinking about how we could have more of a dialogue between club and fan, right? And the utility that comes with owning a digital collectibles, it's endless what we can do, right? Money can't buy type of experiences, whether it be coming to Old Trafford or such. But there's way more to come when it comes to blockchain-based technologies. I do really think that it's going to help with the overall trusted relationship between fan and fandom and the club. Use cases in ticketing, naturally, use cases in different elements of that. But it's something which our team are very, very proud to have brought to market, and it continues to develop into new things like Fantasy United is something which we launched this year, which is a trading card game built upon built upon fantasy sports. So yeah,
you're setting the standard on that way, and I think that's interesting. And one of the things that I'm thinking about, because you mentioned the conversation between the fan and the club, but the reality is that the fan today, I heard it described once and I thought it was interesting, is more fragmented. And what I mean by this is, and they're less passionate, meaning they probably are interested in football content or sports content, but they just consume it differently in terms of, the type of the formats. There's documentaries, there's fantasy games, there's, there's short form video, whatever, how has this shift in behavior changed the frameworks or how you approach fan engagement?
First of all, and I said this on stage yesterday, I'm actually trying to get the word engagement out of my head when it comes to talking about this.
You're not the first one to tell me this.
I really like to think about it as fan enjoyment.
Okay.
Right. And I like to think about how do we show up, or how do we give some sort of an experience to our fans wherever they want to interact with the brand of Manchester United. Right. So we are very careful and thoughtful when a new opportunity presents itself to put our brand or something representing the club in front of. You can take social channels for an example. You can take Web3. You can take different elements like that. We want to make sure that quality remains at the heart of what we do. I think we must adhere to the values that the club of Manchester United represents. There's an expression that sometimes has been used before at the club, which is we're not necessarily the first to the party, but we like to be the best dressed when we get there.
Ah, nice.
Right?
I like that.
So we weren't the first to launch a YouTube channel. And we were actually the last Premier League club to come into YouTube. But then when we did put it active, it went to number one right away.
Okay, I understand.
So yes, we're careful, we're thoughtful, and we make sure that we don't let our fans down when we do decide to enter a new ecosystem where they may be expecting us to be.
And I'm curious, Dave, what makes a brand like Manchester United so powerful? Because, this is not, I don't want to disrespect, but the reality is that, the performance on the pitch hasn't been what we've been accustomed to seeing from Manchester United, but from a brand perspective, it's still in top 3, at least in the world from a football perspective. So how do you keep that relevance?
Well, at the end of the day, the team is the engine, and we are very much focused on improving the team performance. We're not satisfied on where we are at the table, or that we're not playing in Champions League this year. And I think a lot of the efforts that both that the new ownership group has come in, new investment into the club, is embarking on, is to obviously improve the team first and foremost. Although we have a legacy of winning, and we have a legacy of star players, and we have a tremendous history at United of being top tier, if we don't start winning again and finishing or contending for titles, I think it's inevitable that we would start to see that fan base erode.
Okay.
If not this year or next year, then maybe in 10 or 20 years. So I think it's paramount that we have to get back to winning. Okay. That does, that generates the best content. Winning, spectacular goals, great highlights, all that type of stuff. For a football club, that's where you get the most viral outcomes from.
Understand. You mentioned content, you mentioned stories, which brings me to my next question, which is, you see the increased importance of content in the sports business model, so you have, and I'm wondering, because you have your traditional, you mentioned it before, your traditional pillars, you have your match day, you have your commercial, you have your broadcasting, but content is becoming so key. So what do you think is going to be the role of content in the traditional sports business model?
Yeah, it's enabled to serve our fans where they're wanting us to be. It's huge demands to produce relevant content for the channel that they're expecting. I think it's absolutely fundamental that we double down on our content efforts, that we continue to find the creative stories, whether it be player-led stories and getting closer with those type of lifestyle-based storylines, or hopefully, showcasing another Garnacho overhead kick to win a match. right? There's going to be more and more emphasis on that. We also understand that as we move to more of a direct to consumer world and a more personalized world, which we fundamentally are investing in, content is almost the hook, right? Out of all the things that we try and do to grow the direct-to-consumer business, getting people into our ecosystem through content is paramount. That drives different types of engagement things, whether it be an e-commerce transaction or a membership, things like that. And certainly one of the successes of our digital collectibles product was the fact that we were able to command such a large audience through different types of content.
At the end of the day, you were mentioning about the conversation between the fan and club. I would say the content is kind of like the language that connects the two, So, and speaking of which, there's also a lot of talk about connecting directly with the consumer or with the fan. I tend to believe there's much more than that in terms of, because the context that everybody talks about it is, the streaming service. How can I create my own streaming service to go directly to the fan? But I think there's much more than that. And I don't know if I'm mistaken. Do you agree? How do you approach that?
Well, we do have MUTV as our own streaming service, which is globally distributed, both through partner affiliations, but also that we do offer on our own channels as well. Look, I think consumption patterns are evolving, but I think the pay TV ecosystem and delivering top tier content through a live match is continuing to be paramount, no matter how different the different means of accessing it. Right. I'm very thrilled, but working with the likes of Sky and NBC. To know how we can lean into the things that they're doing to help broaden the array of what the match day experience can be when you're not actually attending the match live. And I think there's a big opportunity and a role of technology to help give the fans what it actually feels like to be in the Stretford end at Old Trafford. And I'm very excited as we move into the next few right cycles on how both the league and our broadcast partners will embrace some of these new technologies.
Amazing. And I think, as to your point, I think they're complementary, from the traditional business model of the broadcasting. These direct-to-consumer initiatives can also be, complementary to whatever is in place already at the club, no? Anyway, Dave, this has been an amazing conversation. I want to thank you. I don't know if there's anything else you want to leave the audience with before we go?
No, I think thank you for inviting me, and thank you to the World Football Summit and the people of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for hosting that. It's been fascinating to see how football is developing in the country from afar, and now getting to experience it by being on the ground. I am very thrilled and happy for the people of Saudi Arabia.
Well, I appreciate you being here on the panel, on the podcast, sharing your knowledge, and hopefully we'll bring you back someday and you can tell us more how you see the industry evolve.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Take care.